So watch on the silver screen. I got some takes you wouldn't believe. Popmosis Film.
Happy Halloween! Early.
I know, right? I am your ghost. You're recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm your
Or
ghost
is
host, Paul.
he?
Whoa!
Yeah, I know. Am I really? It's electromagnetic. What's it? EVP. Electronic voice phenomena.
So this is a Halloween episode, but because it's possibly all psychological, you can use this episode and listen to it any time of year.
I'm
So
sure
that's the
none
good
of
news.
us are real.
Yeah.
But I like the EVP thing. Can we all like do an entire episode as like Zach Bagans and like the Ghost Adventures crew? We're like, dude,
totally.
oh my god, dude, did you hear that? Dude, look at my arm, dude, look at my hair, dude.
We should totally do that.
That's my impression.
That'd be a great episode. Ooh, we're week 2 of our Halloween extravaganza. But yeah, how are you guys doing? Are you having plans for Halloween?
Oh, quarantining.
Yeah.
I'll say this: Penny, my daughter, my older daughter, who is 3.5, has picked out costumes for the family. Judy is going to be Owlette, which is one of the PJ Masks. I am going to be Spider-Man. My other daughter, Prim, is going to be Olaf, and Penny is going to be Spider-Gwen from Into the Spider-Verse. So I don't know how she came to that conclusion, but
So I think Tyler should be Kung Fu Panda. And the reason why I bring that up is because we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about The Shining.
What a segue.
Yeah.
I actually already have a
The
costume.
Shining. One of Stanley Kubrick, well, actually, my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie. I think one of the best horror movies of all time. I fucking love this movie, by the way. And every time I see this movie, I get something new out of it. But before I move further, I want to segue to Josiah. So hit us with the production information, Josiah.
So we are talking about The Shining, released. It was released. Movies get released in those days. It was released June 13th, 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, as Paul said. Novel by Stephen King, who did nothing before or since, as did Kubrick. Neither of these guys I've ever heard from them again. But it was written with Kubrick and Diane Johnson. And, of course, well, I'm sure we'll talk a bit. Stephen King hated.
What? I thought he loved
version.
it so much. He was like, I need to remake this because it's so good.
And I'll say this, I'm a huge fan of the book. I love the book. I think it's my favorite Stephen King book, and it's amazing. And I still appreciate the movie. I don't love the movie because of the nature of the movie. It's not. I don't think it's. I would say it's not a movie that wants you to love it, even though you can appreciate it as a masterpiece. But I understand reading the novel why Stephen King would hate it. But we'll sort of get into that as it comes up as we go. It stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance, and Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance, who the only other thing he did was he was also a young G. Gordon Liddy. And G. Gordon, of all things, that was like his only other acting credit.
Bizarre.
Yeah, the Watergate guy, G. Gordon Liddy, who like wouldn't testify and like turn on Nixon or whatever. Yeah, so an interesting one. So it was the winner, or nominee rather, of 2 Razzies: Worst Director and Worst Actress for Shelley Duvall. Believe that or not, in 1980, 81, whatever it was. But it is also in the National Film Registry. So I would be interested to find out how many other films were nominated for Razzies that ended up in the National Film Registry. So it had a budget of $19 million and opened at like $622,000. The gross I found was like $45 million, but I'm not sure if that's like a cumulative thing throughout the years because it did not do well initially. It was not appreciated. It was not critically appreciated. People didn't get it. It was one of those movies that kind of grew on VHS, especially at the time. And that's how I first encountered it on VHS, Oliver Video in the mid-90s. I'm like, oh, The Shining, based on that Stephen King book I hadn't yet read at the time. And I was not ready for it when I first saw it. One other person I want to mention behind the scenes is Leon Vitale. If you guys haven't seen the documentary Film Worker, watch it. It's currently available on Netflix. And he's basically this guy who was in Barry Lyndon. And he was an actor, a very successful one throughout like the late 60s and 70s. And then he wanted to like be in this, he saw Clockwork Orange and his life was changed, and he wanted desperately to work with Stanley. He got to work with him as an actor, and then essentially gave up his life to be kind of sort of Stanley's assistant, kind of his gatekeeper, did all these things for him. And he was actually the one who coached the young Danny in this film and as an acting coach. And if you ever see the behind the scenes, like if Danny is acting and there's no one on camera, he's talking to Leon. Most of the time, he's not actually acting with Jack Nicholson or something. He's actually interacting with Leon. So if you don't
That's
see the other actor,
crazy.
it's Leon.
I,
Yeah, so
I'm
watch
sure they get
watch
into
Film
it.
Worker.
There's that documentary. It was like Room 237, right? That's the documentary. That's like the full length one about this film.
Yeah, this is different. This is just about it's called Film Worker. It's just about Leon and his experience with Stanley. 237 is all about the weird, crazy conspiracies that people associate with
Oh, that's
film.
what that is?
Yeah.
All conspiracy theories.
Oh, I want to watch that one. I want to watch that.
It's interesting, but you can find, a million more of them on YouTube too. I mean,
true.
they're interesting. There's some. I feel like there's some truth to all that stuff.
Yep.
So
Can I say that I don't know if you know this, but Danny does cameo in Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, he's the guy.
I knew it
he's
when
like,
Paul pointed out to me.
yeah, he's the guy in the stands, and he's like, oh, that kid, he's gonna go in the majors. He always hits the ball, and it's funny. His face looks the same. It's like 40 years later, he has the same face.
So
his credits are Shining, G. Gordon Liddy as a kid, and then Doctor Sleep.
Yep. And his goatee's on point too. I have to give him credit for his goatee. He's a good goatee.
I admire goatee.
Yeah, it's a good goatee.
And Leon is also the one who, like, he actually basically cast Danny as well. So in the documentary, there's a moment where, like, he's sitting down and he, like, gee, I really like your suit. That's what, like, after a long stretch of not talking, and that just opened it up, and, like, Leon knew that they had Danny at that point. And so it's just kind of cool to see how he was working on, like, sort of, I think Stanley Kubrick sent Leon a copy of The Shining, the book, and that's kind of how he brought him into the process that would go until Stanley passed. He was still working with him with things. So that is just an interesting side note. There's a lot more. Maybe it'll come up as we talk, but it's just kind of interesting. Those, Film Worker. It's the story of a guy who you never know, you never hear about, you never see, who laid, that sort of the digging the ditches for a guy, like a genius like Stanley Kubrick, and kind of that documentary is about how you can get caught up in the light of that genius. So that's it's definitely worth watching, especially if you're a Kubrick fan. And if you're just not and you're just interested in film, watch it.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome.
So the funny thing about this movie is that before I even saw it as a little kid, it had this mystique around it. And I would see hints of it as I was growing up. And I would ask my parents, like, hey, what is this movie, The Shining? Like, I want to see it so bad. And my parents would say, no, it's too disturbing. You can't watch it. Like, it's not for you. You're only 8 years old. Like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't watch it. It's just too much. And so
granted, my parents would be scared to show me Jack Nicholson too when I was 8 years old. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so I remember watching the Treehouse of Horror, The Shining, and I was like, what is the source material? This is amazing. I saw
season 6, episode 6 of
is
The
that what
Simpsons,
it
by
is?
the way.
Yeah, I saw that. I in fact saw the
best Treehouse of Horror
movie.
The best Treehouse of
Yeah,
Horror.
it's one of the best ones by far. And then the thing that really piqued my interest was I saw Twister, and there's a scene where they're at the drive-in theater, and they have the here's Johnny's scene playing in the drive-in theater, and then like a tornado comes and like takes the drive-in away. And as I was watching Twister, I was like, this movie's forgettable. And the only thing I remember that movie is that little drive-in scene because of The Shining. And so I pleaded with my parents. I'm like, I need to see this movie. So I finally saw the movie when I was like 16, and I was just blown away. I love this movie so much, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. And a lot of it has to do with how effective the horror is, because what they do here is they take all the horror conventions and really subvert them. And they really emphasize the mundane so that the supernatural really shines later on in the movie,
Get out. Just kidding.
It's like in the beginning, there's like an interview with Jack, and there's they have like a doctor's appointment because Danny has he has a fit, and with red rum, and so it's like all this mundane stuff that goes on through their day, and even before they arrive at the hotel, and it really juxtaposes like what happens later on as like the tension ramps up. So what I want to ask you guys is, how did you find this film? Like, what was your journey getting to this film, and what were your initial impressions when you first saw it?
So before we recorded, I was telling you, like, this is the first time me seeing this film since middle school, and I thought I remembered this film really, really well. And the only thing that I've really watched that would have anything to do with this is the South Park episode where Randy Marsh gets the blockbuster, which is actually one of my favorite episodes as well. And it's insane how good of a job they recap The Shining in South Park. It's phenomenal. I want to give them credit for that. I absolutely love that episode, and it's so good now that I've watched it because I just watched all of South Park in the quarantine, so it was really fresh in my mind. I like this film a lot. I love Stanley Kubrick. I think this movie is so good. There are things about it that are weird, but then it's nothing bad at all. Like, I think it's so weird that Shelley Duvall got a Razzie Award. I don't think she was. I think her reactions are phenomenal in this movie, but there are weird things that she does that is really terrible. Like, her running is really weird. It's just a really weird way of running that did not look practical, and it didn't look like she was.
And I think a factor is you probably have 40 takes of her doing that. There's rumors that some of the takes where she would run up the stairs, like when, that she would have to do it 40, 100 times, like, because that's how Kubrick did films.
Yeah, well, he treated her like trash.
Particularly brutal to her. He disliked her. He actually, I saw an interview with the screenwriter Diane Johnson, and she talked about how he actually took lines away from her too. And she kind of framed it as less about like the film and all that, and that Kubrick took the lines away because he disliked her. That's the way it seemed in the interview, as opposed to like it's better for the story.
It's well documented.
So I think that like her physical performance, part of why it works is she was worn down.
Yeah, it's actually well documented how much like Kubrick really tormented her.
Yeah, it's
and,
not.
If
it's
you
not
see
good.
the documentary, it's done by Vivian Kubrick, Stanley's daughter, of the making of The Shining. There's a lot of parts where like Shelley Duvall's like laying down on the ground, like exhausted, or she's like her hair is falling out, or she's like having a panic attack, and like every time she enters the room with Kubrick, like Kubrick just like frowns, you see a noticeable expression on his face.
I heard like a lot of stories like he would not talk to her directly. He would wouldn't even look at her. Like, I heard like all these stories like throughout the years and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, and even like in
I
film class.
I recommend that documentary if you want to see it, because there's a lot of interactions like that.
I just brought it up, and just from like the preview on Google, because Google now does a preview thing with videos. I just see like Jack Nicholson like running in place, getting ready for a scene and stuff, and it looks intense. It looks awesome. Like
it's the act scene,
raw.
how he gets himself amped up. It's pretty cool how if you watch the documentary, because it's basically in real time. He's like just so casual. It's amazing how he's just how good he is as an actor, that he can get there really quickly. And he was kind of the opposite. Like on set, like it was exhausting, but he would just like lay down on the floor and sleep. Because and part of it is like at that point, like he's like, he's that kind of guy. It's like, sure, you're a genius, Kubrick, you're a powerful man, but you don't have power over me. I'm just acting in your movie. I'm just gonna lay down and I'll get up and I'll do it.
It's funny, when this movie first came out, a lot of the criticism was on Jack Nicholson. They thought his performance was too cartoonish, actually. Do you believe that, or
that was actually what I was gonna get at? So, like, I think there were some weird things about this movie that I didn't remember, and I actually wanted to say, like, it's weird. He starts off like really, really nice and like like a family man, like like kind of like that funny YouTube video where they reshot the movie to make it look like a romantic comedy. Like, it kind of started off with him being like a loving husband, and then he just turns into a complete asshole, and then it turns down a little bit back to where he's like an okay husband again, and then it just like ramps up real quick. But like that dip, I don't remember the dip, and it kind of felt weird because when she first talks to him in the office, he's such an asshole to her, and then he gets like relatively nice again, and then he goes into the bar for the first time and meets Lloyd, and then she comes in, and or at least and then the next scene after that is when he's an asshole to her again. It was just this really weird dip that I don't remember, and that it kind of took me out of it a little bit.
It's funny that you bring that up, because I feel that's actually one of the only flaws in this movie is, because there's two of those scenes, the two typewriting scenes. The first one, Wendy comes over with a sandwich, and she's like, "Hey, Jack, here's a sandwich," and he's like, "I'm fucking typing here." leave me the fuck alone. Get out of here.
Yeah, if you hear me typing in here,
right?
that means don't come the fuck in or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and then so the second encounter is he's screaming, and Wendy runs over to him, and she's like, "Hey, Jack, are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I dreamt that I murdered all of you." And he's like in distress, and she's there for him. And then Danny walks in the frame, and she's like, "Did you do this? Like, did you do this, Danny?" Like she's blaming him for Danny's like the bruise on his throat. And so I think those scenes should have been switched. First scene should have been that one where he's in distress, thinking like, "Oh my God, it killed my family," because he's still vulnerable. And then later on, it should have been the one where he like freaks out and he's like, "Get the fuck out of here." And then when she walks away, she bumps into Danny, and so she connects the fact that, hey, Jack is a threat. He just treated me like this. He probably hurt our son. So would it fit a lot better if they switched those scenes? So for me, that's the only flaw in this movie is that editing.
You
But
can't flip those scenes though, because then what happens is that's where everything then begins with the supernatural within it. That's where she has to confront him, because so what it is there's the two arguments. If it's real, that's when the supernatural becomes manifest itself physically and assaults Danny, right? Sure, the characterization you could argue should be altered, but you can't move the other scene around, right? Because so then it
because it could be Jack the whole time, or it could,
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Oh, that makes
You
sense.
know,
I mean, that's
or
the
it's
thing,
either
though.
or Jack did the act, or Jack physically assaulted Danny. That's the other argument, and he's in this dream state where he is either using it to manipulate, which is very, very likely. Yeah, he's either
Okay.
using it to manipulate, or he doesn't know that he did it. Those are the other arguments. You can't move the scene though, because then that's really where the action of the film really begins. Because then he goes and investigates, and then once he investigates and he lies about, because he sees the woman in the room and he lies because he essentially is cheating on her, and that's where the turn fully happens. So you could argue though that that's the point where he possibly could have come back to his family. He's being pushed, coming, and then he starts to come back, and then boom, it's gone.
Yeah,
he can't come back.
That actually makes sense, because it's also before the scene where he has the nightmare and he wakes up. It's the scene, before that is when Danny goes into the room to get his fire truck, and he sees his dad is up, and he's not sleeping, and then he has the really awkward scene. So that actually means, so basically he quote unquote fell asleep before the first typewriting scene, and he was asleep the entire time until she wakes him up from that nightmare. Is that what you're saying? That's now how I see it, with your explanation. Some before the scene of when he's yelling at Shelley Duvall, he has to be asleep at that point.
Well, I just think of it, that first scene is kind of uncharacteristic of him at the point, because he's not yet at the full third act Jack Torrance, but he's acting like that. He's acting like he's about to grab an axe, and attack her. And then the second scene, he's vulnerable. He's more vulnerable like he was earlier in the movie. So I just think it's like kind of uncharacteristic for him to.
But I think it also though it shows you that he's a threat. You have to actually show that he's a threat, because you're hinting at it. And I think the way I kind of view a lot of the film is that I think Jack loves Danny and appreciates Danny, but he hates Wendy, and he resents her to no end. So I think like we talked about Kubrick, I think part of how he behaves is he manipulates her to control her. So he either manipulates her through anger and aggression, or through, I need you to comfort me now. I'm the child now. You need to take care of me. I think that's what's
blames
going
her
on
for his failures, basically.
So this can be something before they even move there. Then it could just be a prolonging thing.
The thing with Jack's performance is that it's so nuanced that I feel like he's kind of at a boiling point even before they get to the hotel. Like he's just kind of really frustrated, and at the end of his rope. So in the beginning of the movie, he's like a normal guy, but he's trying to keep it together. He's like trying to keep his shit together. He's like sober for 5 months, and he's trying to like keep everything together. And this is his last chance. And so, I mean, I see it that way, that there's like, he is a looming threat, and you kind of see it through performance, but
Like he
You don't
becomes an
really need
asshole for a
scenes.
second, and then he midnights in Paris and becomes a way worse person.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you could put it
I
that
think
way.
because I've heard Stanley Cooper talk about it. Like he said, part of it is the nature of the Jack Torrance character is that he's essentially ready because of who he is. He's ready to do the bidding of the hotel. He's ready to go there. It just he needs that nudge.
And since we're gonna spoil the movie eventually, it's also the reincarnating thing. It's like you can't really escape what is inevitable at this point because the reincarnating and
Because and it's like we can talk about that.
I think that this movie is so good. I don't think it's the best Stanley Kubrick movie in my opinion. I still think that goes with 2001: A Space Odyssey in my opinion. But I really, really do love this film. I really do. I think Jack Nicholson is so good. I think Danny is even phenomenal. Like the kid, he's creepy and scary, unlike any other kid in horror movies. Where I think in this movie, instead of him being like the one who brings all the evil, it's kind of like it's the exact opposite. Where he's kind of like, he's the one that's actually saving the day, talking to Dick Halloway. And
Halloran.
what was it? Oh, sorry, I had it up. And
Halloran.
I have so many Shining tabs, and with Dick Halloran, and so like it's weird seeing the kid be kind of creepy, but then also like he's the good, he's like the savior of this movie, kind of basically getting his mom to safety.
I think of it this way: like Danny is the conduit for the audience, and he feels to me, Danny feels like a real boy. He doesn't feel like an actor kid, or a kid that's pretending to be, a kid. He feels like a real kid, and I just he has this authenticity about him that the same way Charlie Bucket did in Willy Wonka. Like there's this authenticity. What's his name? Peter something. I forgot what the name is of that kid. But Charlie Bucket and Willy Wonka, like he's like he doesn't feel like an actor. He's very authentic, and that's a thing. It's like because he's so authentic, like you really care about this kid. Like you want to make sure he's okay, and he does act like normal kids. Like normal kids are pretty quiet and they observe things that are going around him. And I really like how like Jack after he does the tour, Jack is like, "Hey, are you busy bombing the universe?" And Danny doesn't have no response. Like he doesn't know how to connect to his dad. He doesn't really know how to connect to his mom, but he connects with Halloran because they have The Shining and like they actually have that connection. And so I like the fact that Halloran becomes sort of like a surrogate father figure at the point when Jack is sort of descending into madness.
I will say that there's one thing that actually really bothers me about this movie as well. One thing, I think the movie is 5 minutes too long. I really do. I don't like the fact that that Shelley Duvall, her character starts seeing the ghosts too. I think that was too much. I don't like the one with the dog and the dog giving a blowjob to the guy in the hotel room. That's not needed. It doesn't add anything to the film. It just honestly to me it was more comedic than it was effective.
No. That's the whole purpose of it. The whole purpose is to be disturbing. It's like there are people there that shouldn't be there. They're alone in the hotel, and the fact that people are appearing in places they shouldn't be. That's the scary thing about it.
Well, I understand that, but like I don't know. I just think like maybe like Danny seeing it, I think makes sense. I think that she should be this one where she throughout the entire movie shouldn't know what's happening, should not be experiencing anything. All she knows is that her husband's become a complete dick and now he's trying to kill her, and then like and that's it. No other explanations. Like that's all she knows. And then also with Danny saying red rum and then in the knife saying murder, like saying weird things like that. I think for me it would be more effective having Shelley Duvall's character not understand any of the supernatural and not know what's happening throughout the entirety of it and just trying to save.
I disagree. I think the thing is that what's so good about the ending is that it separates both of them. It separates Danny being chased by Jack, and then Wendy's encountering all the ghosts. And so there's like no semblance of like safety at all for these characters. Like you really feel that they are in jeopardy, that Jack at any moment could catch up to Danny and the ghost can get to Wendy. Like there's no sense of safety. And I think that's what's so disturbing. It's like these characters, like I really feel that they could die, that they are in jeopardy. And I've seen this movie like dozens of times, and it still like frightens me on a visceral level. And so I think all of that really works so well.
Yeah, and I think
I
that's
think
important. Like just the reason you said, Paul, but also because like if you think about it, when you're in a place where you expect that there's no one else, the scariest thing is the idea that someone else is there.
yeah,
When you hear that noise, that's what that is. That's the manifestation of that. And plus, it's just it plays on like Paul said really well. There has to be some jeopardy there has to be some kind of threat between Wendy getting to Danny at that point, because Halloran is taken out of the picture, which is one of the big changes from the novel as well, because he's the hero. He shows up and gets him out. So that's literally like, if you read this book, even you are not safe, because the guy who comes and saves the day, the guy who was like telegraphed the whole way through as saving the day, which is maybe the one thing you could say is a flaw in the book, that he used, and he goes down. And of course, hilariously, then they play on it on that Simpsons episode where Willie then gets axed in every single episode when he's about to show up to save the day. It's like, I'm in every time.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And here,
I
this is-
hate
and-
his death. I love Halloran, and it was just so fast, and like you don't see him die. He just falls, and then the next scene, when Shelly sees him on the floor, like that was it. You're just like, oh, like he just is dead. All right, okay,
I love that.
Well, you got to have the murder somewhere, right? And who else
Yeah.
is in the hotel? So there's got to be, and that's what's feeding that energy that all this is able to manifest itself. Is there is murder? There's about to be murder. It's about to happen. The cycle of violence is about to continue. Because that's what I see, and I'm sure you guys would agree. The film is to me really about, like, there's all those theories about the deeper meanings, but I think on a simple scale, it's about cycles of violence. And the question is, can Danny break those cycles of violence that his father has set forth? And I think that for me, that really manifests in the hedge maze when Danny is going one direction and his dad is looming out there. And the way they shoot that, the way we haven't talked much about the cinematography, but the way Kubrick shoots that in particular, it's one of the most. There's a lot of, like, early in the film, he uses like everything's big and there's small figures of people.
Uses,
So
white
the
ink.
large against the small, so you feel so tiny. Even when you watch it, you feel small. You feel little. Right at the beginning, that the Montana landscapes, it's like some national park in Montana or Wyoming or something. That, by the way, connection to Blade Runner, because Kubrick wouldn't fly to get that footage himself, so he shot like hundreds of hours of helicopter footage so that he have enough to then give it to Blade Runner for that bad happy ending, by the way. So, which is, we talked about in the Blade Runner episode. But then at the end, when he's in the hedge maze, though, Danny, the way he's filming it, like, it's this, you see Jack coming towards you, and it's like this sharper focus for him, and then Danny is, you're pursuing, like, you feel it, and just the world is, you feel like Danny's about to get taken in and consumed by his father. You really do. Like, and the way he escapes, though, it's not like he like ducks him or something. He finds a way to break the cycle by retracing his steps in the snow and hiding. He breaks the cycle, and I that's the way I see the film. And it's a weirdly hopeful film, even though it's totally also not, because of the way it ends after that.
Yeah.
So.
But I love that there's a couple things you bring up that are really great. So the whole movie, Kubrick uses wide angle lenses so that it kind of opens up the space of the hotel, and it also makes each of our characters in the frame kind of smaller than they normally would be. And so what I love about that is that it frames the hotel as if the hotel is going to swallow them whole. And what I love is that, as it's almost like mathematically or something that he's doing this, but as we get further along in the movie, he gets closer and closer to the characters, as if the hotel's swallowing them, like gonna get them. And it's a subtle thing that he does, and a very nuanced thing in terms of cinematography that he does, where he just gets closer and closer and closer. And another thing that what is really interesting to me that you brought up is actually when Halloran gets killed. And first of all, I like how it removes that illusion of safety that, like Halloran's going to come and save them. But also, one thing I did notice is that every time Jack gets upset or more angry, you hear that heartbeat sound. And I know you know what I'm talking, like the dun, 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 dun. You hear that, and it ramps up as his aggression and anger ramps up. and so you're kind of you almost have like a Pavlovian response. Like every time Jack is angry or upset or something, you hear that sound, and so as soon as Halloran gets there, it's quiet. It's completely quiet. He walks the halls of the hotel and he's like, Danny, Wendy, calling out for them, and it's completely quiet. All you hear is a snowstorm outside, and then Jack comes in, like, axes him in the chest. At no point do you hear that heartbeat sound that you're expected to hear before Halloran gets murdered. And then it comes on again as you see Jack rise up into the frame with his bloody face and with his axe, and you hear like this, like almost like, well, Native American chants playing in the background. So I just, this movie is like, it's so amazing how it's pieced together, and so it's like this interesting craftsmanship that I don't necessarily see in a lot of movies nowadays, and it's like something that is amazing to me. Also, the Steadicam was actually invented for this movie, and one thing that always rings in my mind is Danny's Power Wheels going over the carpet, then the wooden floor, then the carpet. That sound, that sound effect, and he's going around the hotel. It gives you a good sense of like the geography of the hotel, but it's also kind of unnerving because he's on the first floor, and then all of a sudden he's on the second floor, and he turns the corner. Oh, there's the Grady twins. Like it's very unnerving. Every
Yeah, like
aspect.
literally, you can't get a real sense of like what Kubrick does is establishes the space so well, but then you could never get a grasp on things because it's the way it's designed that you really never have a sense of where everything is into relation to anything else. It's literally an impossible space. So then and then of course even that, like, you have that exterior shot of the real the not the real hotel that the actual hotel that they used for the exterior, and then they for the helicopter shot, and then they built a set on in L Street in England, and where they filmed the actual, like, when they were characters on set for the hedge maze and stuff, and you can see that there's no hedge maze in that shot. It's like, it's the mountain. So it's like, and I think Kubrick was like, yeah, I'm fine with that.
That's weird because, man, he obsessed over the weirdest shit.
But I think that's part of it. It's like it's the hotel. I heard someone describe it like this for Night of the Living Dead before, how you could have a film theory that the house in Night of the Living Dead is our head, and that's our psyche. I think that's what the hotel in the Overlook is. It's a maze. It has rooms that go places that they shouldn't, that are bigger than they should be, that
So like the
that
Worcester,
expand in other ways. Yeah.
The Worcester
And
house?
going along with that, if you look at the hedge maze, the grooves kind of look like the grooves of a brain. So there you go.
Oh, it totally does. Yeah.
Yeah, when you go at a bird's eye view, it looks like the grooves of a brain in a way.
When I pop my own head open and look at my brain and just admire the beauty of it, I see the same. Looks just like a hedge maze.
By the way, so I was wondering, like, being how this movie's so visual and such a striking visual movie, is there any image or scene that really pulls you into the movie that really, like, is memorable to you? That,
for me, the bathroom scene with what's his name? With the
Jack?
reincarnation of, I mean, it's him and Grady. With him and Grady, it's just
like
so well shot.
When they're having the conversation with the urinals.
The intensity of the scene, both actors are so good, and I don't know, it's the colors, how clean everything looks, but then how raw and terrible their conversation, like, and as it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it's so good. I honestly love that scene, and then I love any scene. Like, I love when Shelley Duvall interrupts him at the typewriter. For the first time, I love that scene. I absolutely love that scene too. I mean, I think it's terrible what he's doing, but it is such a good cinematically done scene.
I think one thing, I would agree. Like Tyler talking about the scene in the scenes with Lloyd are also very good. Another Blade Runner connection. It's the same actor who plays Tyrell, and
oh yeah, Lloyd, yeah.
Yeah, his name escapes me. Forgive me, but he's Tyrell. Yeah, there you go. And so, but I really thought watching it this time was something I discovered and I noticed for the first time is how those are the first time I see Jack having a real natural conversation where before that it's always very awkward and strange and stiff, like when he's interviewing and stuff, and even when he interacts with the family in the car, it seems so inhuman, unnatural. But then when he's talking with these ghosts, then that's when it's like, and I'm doing the air quotes for the audio only thing. You can't see my air quotes. Are they ghosts? Or are they what? We don't know. But point being is that's when it's bizarre because that's when he is more human and he is more himself. And that's what really caught me about those scenes, in particular the one where he's with Grady, because he's like putting it together what's going on, but also like being consumed by what's going on. It's a really great scene of writing and a great scene of acting, and it's just also super super scary because of that setting in that bathroom and the image and those urinals that go all the way to the ground. If I ever go into a bathroom that has those urinals in the ground, I'm like, oh my god, I gotta find another bathroom. I can't pee here. First, I don't want to pee on my shoes, but also that was what I think of The Shining. One of the Leon Vitale guy that I mentioned earlier, one of the other things that he did was when he was going around the United States to cast Danny, he actually was also sort of location scout. So they built sets. Everything was sets that were built, but he would go around and take pictures of all the hotels and everything they visited everywhere to then send it back to Stanley. And he had like tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff that would then help make what the hotel would look like. So it's not based on any single hotel, but like, every hotel kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Joe Turkel is still alive today.
Wow.
He's almost 100. That's insane. Sorry,
Joe.
He looked almost 100 when this film.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, Jesus Christ.
He must be like a Nexus 10 or something.
He looks fine. He actually hasn't. It looks like he hasn't aged that much. And this was like,
it's like Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman always looked like he was 50, even if you go back. To like.
But yeah, I'm just
once he turned 30, he like looked 50, and he just stayed 50.
Like Steve Martin. Yeah, Steve Martin got white hair like 21 or something.
Maybe he's one of the ghosts in the Overlook or something, and we don't know about it. So. One thing I wanted to highlight is, have you guys actually seen Room 237? Have you?
Yes.
Well, no. I didn't. I mean, I knew of it. I didn't know what it was or anything. I just knew it was a documentary. I was gonna watch it, but I can't. It's not streaming.
Okay. Well, what do you think about it, Josiah?
It was alright. I mean, you can find the same theories on YouTube. There's a lot of that kind of conspiracy-ish stuff. The moon landing one. There's the most valid one, which is actually used very and I think intentionally because it's about the cycles of violence, is the idea of it's in part about the massacre of Native Americans by the white man, which makes sense. There's a lot of the motifs. There's a point where Shelley Duvall wears a jacket. The whole hotel, it's like these appropriated symbols. He even mentions what's the guy that he interviews with? I'm forgetting his name. Allman. When Allman in the interview, he mentions like, oh, they even had to repel some, it's built on an Indian burial ground, and they had to repel some attacks when it was built. So I think that's very intentionally there. I don't know that that's meant to be the overall meaning of the film. I think Kubrick's so smart that any film he makes is about many things.
That's true.
I think
people can get like a different take each time or something, kind of like what Paul was saying.
And I think the first thing he wanted was a film that would actively scare you and disorient you and make you question the content of it and think, wow, how do I feel about things? Could I be could I be the aggressor? That's really what I think Kubrick wants you to question. Could I be the Jack?
Yeah.
We all want to Danny, or maybe even to a degree Wendy, protecting, as a parent, I would think I would do anything to protect my child, but could I become victim to that? Because I have a friend that committed suicide a few years back, and it's always like whenever that happened, like that question is like, whoa, how do you get to there? When somebody like Anthony Bourdain, someone I really respect what he did, and I'm like, oh, what was it that got him to that place? And I think Jack is a reflection of that in the sense of crazy ass murder. But what would it take to get to a position to do something terrible? What push would it take for you? That's really what I think Kubrick is nudging, at least when I see the film. So
not
Interesting. Tyler, what were you...
not to derail. It's just it's weird. I don't know why.
I think I derailed with that answer, actually. So.
Oh no, I think it's perfectly valid.
No, if I just because we're talking about Kubrick, especially I actually am more scared of A Clockwork Orange than I am The Shining, which is weird.
Why is that?
I think because A Clockwork Orange is where these people are roaming around, doing horrible deeds, doing terrible, terrible, terrible things. Like the whole scene of them going to that woman's house is, to me, horrifying. And when they're singing, they're breaking into a house or doing something really terrible to her. It's just
that I'll say this real quick to interrupt. That the first time I saw the movie, I got to that scene and I had to stop watching.
Yeah,
I've seen it since, but I had to stop watching the first time I saw it. That was so hard for me to watch. I
feel like maybe like with this one, obviously this is full-fledged horror, where the other one is more of a thriller, whatever the hell genre that is. But like, yeah, I think it's weird because I did see this movie first as a kid, and I had seen other things. Like I remember seeing this with my friend. Shout out Casey Baker. We watched this and then Christine, the car horror movie. And the car horror movie scared me a little bit more, and I don't know why. Maybe because all the kids didn't know what to do. Yeah, and so, but watching it now, it's weird because I think maybe as an adult, and now I've seen most of Stanley Kubrick's movies, some of them multiple times. Like, yeah, I feel like that the intensity of this movie is not lacking. It's just maybe doesn't live up to a horror degree, like I would say A Clockwork Orange, and maybe even like a couple of other scenes from like what's the Tom Cruise movie with Nicole Kidman, Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Like you have that one scene in Eyes Wide Shut where it gets really fucking eerie and weird. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I just remember always feeling like, oh, that one fucking scene, and then I forget what it is. It's weird. I just feel like he's great, and I love this movie, but it doesn't affect me all that much though. It's more of an intense ride as it is a horror scary ride. It's kind of like to me it's kind of like Seven, where Seven's not scary whatsoever. It's gross, but it's more of just like the thrilling and intensity of it.
Well, I don't know. I think with me, what's really scary, what I'm actually going to go. Actually, I kind of agree with Josiah. Is that it's the scary thing is like the corruption of self, that we who we are as a person slowly erodes, and we become like this monster that hunts after our family, and it doesn't take much for us to go they have the ghost kind of messing with his head, and then everything that's going on in his family life before he got there, where he's like lost his teaching job, and he has problems with sobriety. Like all these problems are just stacked up to where it's like eroding at him as a decent human being. And so
it could not even be paranormal. It could just be all that shit stacked up, and he's just going crazy as well.
But I mean,
the film wants you to wonder that. That's part of what.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing completely.
Yeah, so that's a scary thing to me. That erosion of self, like you're becoming somebody that you're not. You're like this. It's like a slippery slope, and that's the thing. It's like no matter what he does to try to push back at it, he just slowly erodes. And that's why I think this movie is so effective. Is because it starts off with a mundane, and they're just having their normal life, and there's little supernatural elements kind of like interspersed in there until it there's this kind of a slow burn, and then it ramps up to where Jack just snaps, and then he's like on a murderous rampage. And so I mean, one part that really I think to me is the scariest scene, and everybody points to the Grady twins or the elevator full of blood. But the scene that scares me the most is directly after Danny sees the Grady twins, and they say, "Come join us, Danny, forever and ever and ever." And then he was closing his eyes. Meanwhile, right after that, Danny goes up to Jack, and like Jack is sitting up in his bed, and he's kind of like disconnected. He's like kind of not really there, and Jack grabs Danny, trying to console him, but everything that he does and says is very like by the motions. Like he's trying to show affection, but his tone is very like robotic. Like, "Hey, Danny, how are you doing?" And then Danny asks him, "Hey, Dad, do you like this hotel?" And Jack says, "I love it. I want to stay here forever and ever and ever." And right then and there made me think, oh my God, the hotel's getting to Jack. Like he is slowly eroding. And that scene right there scares the shit out of me. And I didn't even notice that little
I
bit
didn't
of
notice
dialogue
it. Yeah.
until recently. And it just really chills me. Even right now, I'm kind of chilled just like talking about it. But what were you going to say, Tyler?
No, I was gonna say, like, I don't think he sounds disconnected. It sounds like he is like not interested, but trying to like show that he is like he's just kind of like disgusted more than anything. That like he doesn't want to talk to Danny, but he knows he has to
My take on
because
that
he's
scene
a
is
dad.
kind of somewhere, I think, a little bit different, but maybe leaning towards what Paul had. I feel like that's the last moment where we see the potential for good in him, where he's sort of wants to comfort Danny, but he doesn't know how. He can't, like, he's you could argue he's too far gone, but he wants to be there for his son and make it okay, but his vices are getting to him. It's the quote drinking kind of parable, because that's one thing too, that one of the things that I know Stephen King didn't like about this version was that he felt that the Jack character in the movie he just starts out as a killer and stays a killer. In the book, he's much more, he is a family man. He cares about his family. Also, Wendy's a totally different character, but that's neither here nor there right now. But Jack had, it's this baggage that gets to him. He tries not to, but it overwhelms him. That's kind of the story, and it's very much a parable for alcoholism. And the movie doesn't go into that as much because it starts with Jack sort of, more amped up, because even part of what King didn't like was the casting of Jack Nicholson. He didn't like that because he knew when you see him, it's like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna kill his family. When you cast him, that guy's gonna kill everybody.
Yeah, Jack's pretty intense. Like,
So, but that was like, so those are like, you can say again, I love the film and think it's a brilliant work of art, but I can see why, as someone who also loves the novel, can see why those differences would upset the original author of the novel, because it's to the point where it becomes like very much a different work.
Does he hate?
It's about different things.
Does he hate the movie about? Like, does he think that the movie is a well-made movie, but he doesn't like it as an adaptation?
I have a quote about that. So he wrote. This is a quote I heard today when I was watching some stuff. He described it as a beautiful car that has no engine. So, and he said, his big difference was for how he felt about it, which I think it's another good way to explain it, is King would describe it as literally how they end, right? The book ends in one way and the movie ends in the other way, right? The movie ends with Jack freezing. The hotel freezes. Everything is frozen, covered in snow, which would then be used in Empire Strikes Back, which Empire had to wait to get in those sound stages for The Shining to finish shooting, by the way. So, yeah, all that. I heard people on Empire were getting sick from the fake snow used in The Shining. So anyway, but then the ending of the book, what happens is, spoiler for like 5 things in this one little analogy, in Dr. Sleep, the sequel, I haven't read the book, but in the movie,
there's a book for Dr. Sleep? I didn't even know that.
There's a book, yeah. Stephen King wrote the book. So, but the end of the movie of that, which the boiler goes up and Danny blows up the boiler, which is how the original ending to The Shining was. So it'd be interesting for me, because I haven't read Dr. Sleep, the book. I wonder how it ends, since that ending happened already in The Shining and couldn't happen in Dr. Sleep. But so basically what Stephen King said is, in one you have warmth, literally, and then one you have cold. And that's how he felt it. You have warmth for these characters, and then you have cold. That's how King viewed it, and I get it. And I think they're both effective in different ways, and it's really an interesting testament to very skilled artists in different mediums, like telling this fundamentally, at least in certain terms of the basis of the story, the same story in very, very different ways. So
I like that. No, yeah, that is very interesting, and I see his point too. I not having to have read the book, but from what you're saying, like unless you're like Alan Moore, I tend to understand why a original creator of something seeing an adaptation or a remake or something of their work, like, and having not the happiest of thoughts. Like I said, Alan Moore just hates everything, and I disagree with most of his opinions on things. But and like with this, I've been meaning to and wanting to visit The Shining book as to see why Stephen King hates it so much and loves the TV movie that's terrible, and I've seen, and it is so bad.
It's the TV movie is true to the story.
No, absolutely, but it's just made so bad, poorly.
The why that doesn't work is because it's a TV movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a lot of green light and mist. It doesn't work.
Yeah, but when you read the book, those things are scary in the book. It plays differently because when you see it in your head versus mid '90s TV movie version, it just doesn't. The hedges, because even with the hedges, the hedge. So the big difference is the hedge maze versus the hedge creatures. I was reading that there was a point where Stanley Kubrick investigated, could they have done it with animatronics or stop motion? Could they have achieved like hedge creatures? So it was at least thought about, and obviously they went in the different direction with the hedge maze, because in the book and in the '90s miniseries, the hotel is protected by was it topiaries? What are they called? When they're cut out of hedges, like in animals. So there's like lions and things that would like subtly move, and then whenever things got crazy at the hotel, then they're like actually aggressive. Like so.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I've never read the book. But I have such an affinity to the movie that I think I would have some kind of bias reading the book. I would just automatically think that it's like lesser than, and really that's not the case at all. But is there any scene in the book that you felt should have been in the movie that would have maybe made the movie stronger, in your opinion?
Having not read it in a while, I can't remember anything specific, but one of the things that I loved about the book that isn't in the movie, and I also understand why it's not in the movie, is so there's a part where there's a scrapbook open on the table at Jack's typewriter, right? In the book, that scrapbook is a big deal. So Jack finds that scrapbook and he's working on his project, right? And that scrapbook kind of leads him. He wants to write about the history of the hotel. And as he literally reads the history of the hotel, because he mentions it with Grady too in the bathroom. He's like, I read about you in the newspaper clipping. So those are the only two hints of it that at least, and part of the thing was when they were making this movie, Kubrick was having Diane Johnson. She was on set and they were constantly rewriting, constantly. So even on set, things were changing. Jack Nicholson wouldn't learn his lines the night before because he would assume the next morning he would get new pages. And there's a part.
It's funny in the documentary
in that making of Shining, right, where he's explaining to her that what the page colors mean.
Yeah,
because in a script
directly across the table from Stanley Kubrick is his mom Gert. And he's like talking to his mom Gert, and she's like, "Oh, it's hilarious." By the way, you should watch the documentary. I recommend it to you, Tyler.
I'm like bringing up tabs like in real time as you guys are telling me these things.
So anyway, but that was one of the things that in the book, and I think it's a very writery thing that you love. There's a part of you as a writer that loves research, and a good writer is a researcher. And so Jack, as if he was a good writer, he would be all about researching. But at the same time in the movie, it's also more effective that he doesn't get anything done, and he's never really working. And it's the illusion that he's got this project and he's working on it, and he blames Wendy for not getting it done. He blames Danny. It's everybody else's fault that he can't get his writing done. Whereas in the book, it's that he becomes obsessed with the hotel, and you can actually tangibly understand why. And I think that helps because one of the things that definitely works in the book is the fact that you can have these long monologues within a character's head, so you understand. And that's what I like. That's one thing I like more about any book than the movie, is that you kind of get more of the course of how that character descends into that madness. So you get that, but at the same time, it's more effective as a horror film because he's the film's monster pretty much from the get-go. Like,
well, I just want to say one thing that I think the best horror is always one that's like framed um, in realistic terms. For instance, like I always think The Exorcist is really terrifying because
Yeah,
you
it
know
still
you have
scares me today.
Regan, she's having all these like she's like peeing and like she's having all these like weird behavioral problems, and her mom thinks that she's having a mental breakdown, and she just doesn't know what like she doesn't know what's going on with her daughter, and her daughter is in like this steep decline, but really she's like possessed by a demon, Pazuzu.
Yeah,
But that
yeah,
whole time, that sort of desperation that you see a loved one kind of fall apart or go into decline, I think that's something that's really like terrifying and very realistic and very really resonates well with people. Or like so, and something like this also with The Shining, you just see Jack kind of decline, and you see how frazzled like Wendy is, how just like at the end of a rope she is, and same with Danny, and so it really is. I think the best kind of horror is framed on realistic terms, and so that's why I think this horror movie is like so effective even to this day, and there's so much memorable imagery in it that like I can, a lot of people reference it for their horror films in some way, like they'll have that bird's eye view shot or that helicopter shot of the woods, or they'll have a carpet like in Toy Story. The carpet of The Shining is in Sid's house. That's carpet. So like people reference the movie so much because it's so iconic. And one thing which is kind of funny is like after seeing this movie, uh, it kind of opened my eyes to the way I saw Onward of all movies. And the way I say is that when I watched that movie, I made a point to look at all the Easter eggs, and like all my notes were basically Easter eggs. And so I was basically like not really engaged with the story. I was engaged with the references to a better movie and not the movie itself. And so, like, that's a problem. When I was watching The Shining, there's all these notes. I have like a shitload of notes about the framing of the camera, about all these different stuff, just because I
the
love this movie so
cinematography
much.
in this movie is, I think, one of the best in any film. It's so
Oh
and
yeah,
it's so effective. Like everything like you're saying, like the closer it gets to everybody and the focus of every scene, it makes it to where you're just being engulfed into this hotel. It's so like I felt it. It's so good. It's so effective. It's yeah.
yeah. And I'll give some examples here. What I really love is like so whenever something's at a low angle, generally you're framing the character as a threat or an aggressor, right? If you have a character at a high angle, that's essentially making that character powerless, right? So in the scene where Jack is following, after the typewriter scene, you see all Jack and no play, or all Jack and wait
all
no,
work and no play.
all work
Jack
and
a
no
dull
play
boy.
make Jack a dull boy. There's this long tracking shot with.
I never realized that he never said the line.
He never said the line.
Yeah, I always thought for some reason in my head it was kind of like the "Hello, Clarice," like how Hannibal never says that in any of the Hannibal movies.
Yeah, he never says it, but it's just on the typewriter. Which, by the way, Stanley Kubrick typed himself. But basically, they were, they're doing the tracking shot. Jack is following Wendy. Wendy is like visibly upset. She has the bat, and when they go up the stairs, from Wendy's point of view, it's at a high angle, showing Jack as
She's
powerless.
the high ground. Sorry.
But really, he's the aggressor. He is a danger. So it's like framing. It's juxtaposing a frame. What?
Juxtaposing.
Sorry. I don't know. But it's like
What are those things called at BJ's Pazookies or something like that? Just
Yeah,
Yes,
Pazookies.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's like,
Just the Pazookies.
it's a
you're
get on
taking
your birthday. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
visually you're showing something that's juxtaposing. I finally got it. Juxtaposing what's actually happening in the scene. So and then also there's a lot of times where there's a thing called the 180-degree rule, where if you frame a certain subject, like they'll always stay in a certain point in the frame based on where the camera is, based on the position of the camera. And there's so many times where like when Wendy serves breakfast to Jack, they switch it a lot. They break that 180-degree rule.
Kubrick's broken that rule in other films though too.
Oh, right.
So
And
yeah, he has.
it's funny.
Going
It's
way
like,
back.
Wait,
but it's
I
like
don't. I'm
subtle
confused.
thing
Wait,
that's very disturbing that they do, and it's very like this whole movie's so nuanced in a way that is not normally done nowadays, and so it just really impresses me.
Basically, real
So
quick, Tyler, what that role means for those of you who don't know, like it's essentially you think about when you see a frame like on a television screen, right? You have a character on the right of the screen and a character on the left of the screen. When you cut to the close-ups, the left character would occupy closer but the left portion of your screen. And the same over here with the right portion of your screen. So if you were to flip it around that and then the right person is on the left, it would disorient you, right? That's the idea behind it. And Kubrick intentionally is doing
I
that.
did not
So
realize that, and now I really want to rewatch this movie.
and he did it in like was it The Killers or The Killing, one of his earlier films in the 50s
Oh, The
specifically.
Killing.
The Killing, and there's this fight scene in there where he was doing that, and the part of it is to like show the like sort of the chaos of the fight. And again, it's one of those
Oh
things
God, it's
where
brilliant. I actually like that movie. I know a lot of people do not like that movie.
yeah, but anyway, like the point being is that's you know just breaking those basic rules of cinema of how the audience would this is how you understand this character is here, this character is there, and how they're communicating, so that when you all of a sudden that character on that should be on the right is on the left.
yeah,
Where am I? And that's what the entire film does. The hotel, it does it. Everything does it, especially because it's such the cinematography and the set design, everything's so symmetrical and balanced that when that balance is broken, especially in this film, because it makes everything seem so balanced, that when it's broken, it's jarring. And then especially when it's subtle and little things, like there would be continuity errors that were intentional, where Jack is in one shot, there's a chair behind him, and then it's not, or the chair is moved and it's back and forth, and things you might not notice because it's this subtle. Like I wrote in my notes, it's fear through disorientation. That's part of what this film succeeds. And it's that kind of thing, again, when you're in the house by yourself and you're like, I swear that chair was 6 inches closer to me earlier, and now it's not, and it moved. No, that's impossible. That kind of logic, and that's what Kubrick was putting into the film in all these subtle little ways to throw you off.
And that's the thing that I love about this movie is like every time you see it, you get something new out of it. And what's great about this movie is that everybody has their own theory about what happens, like what happened in the background. But when you do that, when you interpret it in a certain way, you kind of claim ownership of that movie. It's like kind of the fabric of who you are and the way you think. And so that's what I love about this movie is like everybody kind of has their interpretation and their ownership of this movie. And that's why I think it's permeated through pop culture for so long, because it's so memorable, and it's just a part of the fabric of pop culture. A lot of that is attributed to Jack Nicholson, a lot of Stanley Kubrick, and Scatman Crothers, who was Jazz in Transformers. And so having said that, I've been watching this movie. I feel like when Stanley Kubrick passed away, we really kind of lost a true artist, in cinema. And it's somebody that was very versatile. Like he did, 2001, which is sci-fi. Like did many different genres that no other director really does that nowadays, where they go to different genres of movies. Like Doctor Strange.
Spielberg is now finally starting to do that.
I was going to say Spielberg's like the one who does, and oddly enough, he's also one who finished one of Stanley Kubrick's incomplete projects with AI. Watching that movie it's the most interesting mess of a movie, because it's like, how do you reconcile Steven Spielberg, the most sentimental filmmaker ever, with Stanley Kubrick, the least sentimental filmmaker ever? And that's the film you have in AI.
Yeah,
it's like
you have Steven Spielberg, who's done so many, like big movies, sci-fi, not fantasy, but like Jurassic Park and and adventure films as well. And then he does things like Catch Me If You Can and the Terminal, and then now the upcoming In the Heights. Or I'm sorry, he didn't do In the Heights. Sorry, West Side Story. It's fascinating that he's like touching upon all these different things, kind of like what you were saying with like Stanley Kubrick. Well, Stanley Kubrick, I think he's always done intense films. All of his movies are full of intensity to him. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey is about, it's basically like everybody loses. Is like every single one of his movies are about somebody who loses control, or like basically they get their head into something that, and without either being able to have any control as to what the outcome is going to be. In all of his movies, Spartacus, a man who apparently like basically gets kind of over his head and ignites this whole thing where everybody starts believing in him again. 2001: A Space Odyssey, going up against a computer, and I'm trying to think of all of Full Metal Jacket is. All these movies are about these characters that kind of lose control of a certain situation.
I think a lot of it's about too. It's about a lot of his films. When I'm hearing you kind of talk about it, is what I'm hearing. Is that not necessarily you saying, but what I'm seeing in his films is it's a loss of humanity. It's about especially Full Metal Jacket. It's how it just dehumanizes them, and obviously The Shining. It's how he becomes a monster. And then in Clockwork Orange, same thing, and how he becomes less of a human when they sort of sedate him and break him. He's not a human anymore. He's not a person. Sure, he's not committing these horrible acts, but he's not really alive. And on and on and on. It's kind of what I'm seeing. Just hearing you talk about it, which I really hadn't thought about, the connection, the thread, which is interesting because a lot of the time his films have this sort of cold sterileness to them, like 2001 and The Shining in particular.
Yes, absolutely.
But they're really fundamentally about people.
Honestly, I would even say the same thing about Dr. Strangelove. There's this coldness to it that is not fixed, but with the performances is what makes it not so much. But like in a filmmaking and storytelling sense, Dr. Strangelove, the entire movie kind of feels like it's just taking itself so seriously, where everything else is just so not ridiculous, but it's just where it kind of completes and drives the scenes to keep going. Like, the big argument is like, there's no fighting in the war room. Like, it's just so like the stupid little things like that. And I would, there is this thing that he does a lot where it's just either scenes or the entirety of movies where things are just cold and you think you understand what's happening with these characters, and then it just kind of keeps going to a point where, like I said, those characters lose control over as to what they were originally going for. I love this movie. I love to talk about it. But
I love this movie too. I could talk about it for hours, to be honest. But
I have to go to one of those urinals that go all the way to the ground and pee. So.
Oh yeah.
Just make sure that nobody bumps into you and gets a drink on you.
I feel that when Kubrick passed away, it's a great loss to cinema. And is there a particular director that you feel kind of the baton was passed to them, or like that kind of takes over that or picks up from that legacy?
Besides M. Night Shyamalan,
whoa, those are fighting words.
Who directed the Scary Movie? No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad I don't know the name to that one.
The Wayans brothers, isn't it the oldest one?
I think it's Damon Wayans.
No, the older one. No.
Marquis Ivory Wayans?
No. Oh man, I believe it's Keenan Ivory Wayans. Yeah, I mean, directors. So I don't think that there's just one. There's three people that come to my head immediately. Alfonso Cuarón, Rian Johnson, and Duncan Jones. Like, I know Duncan Jones in Warcraft. I'll forgive him for that one. But I would say those three as two people who can do different things, tell different stories, and I love Rian Johnson's filmography. Like, I know you guys know, I've said Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars film. I think Looper was so good. I went into that movie thinking it was going to be the worst movie in the world, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was so much better than I anticipated it to be. Knives Out, I literally stood up in my chair and knocked it over from excitement at the ending of it. Of the reveal scene. It just fucked me up. And Brick as well. I think Rian Johnson is so good, and when there's no studio involvement, like Looper had some issues with studio involvement in it because obviously it's a weird movie, and he was working with Bruce Willis, and that's always a tough hill to climb when you're working with that actor. From lots of different directors and actors have said throughout the years. So a little bit of trivia, I guess, on Bruce Willis. He's a dick. But also I think Duncan Jones. I love Moon. Like, I love that film so much. I think Source Code did not get the love that it deserved. I didn't get to see Mute, so I don't know about that one, but I love Moon so much. And
Moon's a good.
yeah, and then Alfonso Cuarón, I mean, what has he he made the best and the only, in my opinion, the only good Harry Potter film. Gravity, Roma, Children of Men, which I love so much. Y tu mama también is good. Like, that man's so good.
Even his Great Expectations is really good. I think it's a highly underrated movie. Great Expectations. Alfonso Cuarón's Great Expectations, his first English language film.
Yeah, so Tyler, I mean,
Ethan Hawke, Gwyneth Paltrow, worth a watch.
So, I like your answer, but you're wrong. I just want to point that out. I'm just kidding.
Damn.
No, I'm just kidding. No. I think those are great answers.
On that list, Alfonso Cuarón is certainly the closest from those guys.
No, I think
to start with, you have to look at the filmography, and I think the other guys.
But I think
I wouldn't agree, but I don't think either of them have the filmography yet to even be in that conversation. You know what I mean? Like, and we're talking about a man who had an entire life and a body of work, so it's hard to compare.
But my counterpoint to that, though, because I would have said Christopher Nolan, but I don't think Christopher Nolan's that great anyway. But like, the thing is that politics in film are so different than when Stanley Kubrick was around. Like, by the time that Stanley Kubrick...
They really weren't, though, I don't think. I think just Kubrick had so much power. After Spartacus was a studio interference film, and then after that, he would only do films where he had the control. That was his thing. So maybe it's harder to get, like, I think what you're kind of getting at, forgive me if I'm incorrect, is that those guys, it's harder to get that today, no matter who you are.
So
yeah, even after, like, so many movies that you do. I mean, like, again, I'm not the biggest fan of J.J. Abrams, but there is still studio involvement in almost all of his films, even though I know he owns his own company, but other distributors still tell him what to do, and he's talked about it. Like, look at into Star Trek Into Darkness. He's already established himself, and he had so much studio interference in that film. I mean, I think that movie probably would have been bad anyway, but...
I think all your choices, those are fine choices. I just wanted to fuck with you, but
no, I know.
I really like your choices. But one person in particular, I feel is the most like Kubrick in terms of visual style and in terms of attention to detail is Denis Villeneuve. I feel like he is the successor to Kubrick in many ways, and especially with Blade Runner 2049, The Arrival. He is a great director, and I think he's one to watch. Like, he, in my mind, is the closest to Kubrick nowadays, and especially with like studios interfering in projects, I'm surprised that he's able to accomplish the movies he has accomplished. Like Blade Runner 2049 is like an amazing Blade Runner sequel. That
but if Dune sucks, you're totally wrong, Paul.
Oh yeah, Dune sucks.
Dune sucks. You're totally wrong.
I don't think that's
every single movie I've seen. I'm not really connected to the material, but I get drawn in, and it really wins me over. Like Sicario, I saw it on a plane, and I was like, "This is a good movie." And then slowly, I was like, "Holy shit! I need to buy this movie on Blu-ray. Like this, I need to watch it again." There's that sort of urge to rewatch it with his movie. So I feel Denis Villeneuve.
I was actually the same way with Birdman, where like I really liked it the first time I watched it because I had done acting on stage and been in that world and met people like Edward Norton. But there was a scene with Zach Galifianakis that not triggered me, but like I remembered it afterwards, and I was just like, I don't think I remember the scene right, or did I? Or I saw something differently, because that movie's full of like little like foreshadowing and stuff like that, and like other weird things in that movie as it keeps going in the quote unquote one shot that sticks to you, and you're just like, okay, I have to watch this movie. And I watched it again, and to me, Birdman hit me so much harder the second time. And I think Cicero will be the same way. I just have yet to go back to it.
So I think Alejandro Inarritu would be one to add to that list of potential filmmakers, because when you think about his body of work, because that's what you kind of have to look at.
He did the Bear movie with Tom Hardy where they fell in love, right?
The Revenant? Are you talking about The Revenant?
Tom Hardy?
Was that part of The Shining? Where the bear? Where they fell in love?
No.
Love, right?
Was that the director of The Revenant? Was Alejandro? Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was. I'm trying to make a joke that connects it back to The Shining with the scary bear suit guy and the...
Wait, did I say Tom Hardy or Leonardo DiCaprio? I meant Leo.
Pointing out, by the way, The Shining is one of only 2 movies, including Ghostbusters, that has like a ghostly blowjob. So I just wanted to point that out.
Way to class it up, Paul.
Yeah, no, I had
Class it up the
edit that
podcast.
out. That joke didn't land. I saw like Josiah physically cringe. Like he's like, ooh.
Wait, but okay,
So,
but no,
anyway.
actually, did I say Leonardo DiCaprio or Tom Hardy?
You said Tom Hardy.
You
He's
said
in that,
something
isn't
Damn
about
it.
How you love.
Yeah, he is. He's the bad. He's the Tom Hardy's in The Revenant. He's the bad guy.
Oh, Tom Hardy's a bad guy.
Yeah, he's the one.
Leo's the good.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio is the good one. Tom Hardy's the one who left him.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that Tom Hardy wasn't in the movie. That's all.
So as we're wrapping up, do you guys have any final thoughts on The Shining?
I feel really bad for Shelley Duvall. I feel so bad for her. So it's kind of like one of those things. I'm like, do I feel guilty watching this film? I like this film a lot. I do think that maybe the movie should be 5 minutes shorter. Like, I understand what you're saying about the ghost. I think it just got to a point for a little bit where I was just kidding. Like, I think it's aged differently, and I think now we live in a world where pacing has also changed a lot. And but I don't know.
Real quick, the European cut of this movie is like 20 minutes shorter than
Wow,
the cut we watched for this. So there's a version that is 20 minutes shorter.
I did not know that.
20
That's
minutes
crazy.
shorter, yeah.
That's okay.
Wow.
That's too short. I really do think it's just some like maybe Danny tricycling around for a little bit.
Or Shelley Duvall pushing a cart for food.
Yeah.
Those things probably got trimmed.
Maybe even the first radio scene like wasn't exactly that needed because I mean, no here nor there. Like I love this film. I'm very glad we got to watch it. I think this is a fantastic pick, Paul. Great pick for our first Halloween month. So, I love this film, and it definitely trailblazed. This and Exorcist, I think, are just the two most influential horror films in this genre. Not like Dawn of the Dead and like slasher movies, but I think like in this evil, unseen, overlooming evil.
I think what really works so well is that it doesn't show too much. It shows very little, and our minds complete the rest. Like that's what I think. That's what's so effective is that it allows us to come to our own conclusions about the images that are on the screen. Like it doesn't explain anything about the ghost bear and that old elderly guy. Like it doesn't explain anything about that. It just happens. And doesn't explain it, and so our mind is like, "Wait, what?" And like, so it's trying to understand what's going on in that movie. At the same time, the kids are trying, or not the kids. I don't know. Why I said that. At the same time, like Danny and Wendy are trying to understand what's going on themselves. So I think it's so powerful that way.
I actually can I ask a question before we end? I'm so sorry, and like we didn't talk about the photograph ending because that's a very polarized ending. A lot of people either love the photograph, a lot of people fucking hate it. I'm on the camp where I hate it. I actually think I think it should have ended with just a scene of like I would have loved it if it was just the outside of the hotel where it's snowing and then just fading out into darkness
So
what is
your
the night hits.
interpretation of that photo?
Well, what I got from it was just the reincarnating thing. It was just basically it with the Grady's and the Torrances, they just reincarnate every single they basically just switches and they're both stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Tyler, I think what it really means, whether it's actual reincarnation, what have you, it's cycles of violence. It's cycles of violence.
Yeah,
it's cycles of violence.
But we already got that from the bathroom scene. That's why the photograph ending is not needed. I think it's just
or Kubrick, like it's his double middle fingers at the end to be like, now I'm gonna screw with you and make you really think about this thing.
I mean, I think
so it's like drop the mic moment.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna talk about this forever.
He's
And
like,
I'm never gonna explain it.
You're my Shelley Duvall. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, everyone is Shelley Duvall that watches this movie. You feel what she feels.
So I like the cycles of violence metaphor that analogy, because if you think about it, the hotel is like a hotel always exists. Like all those ghosts exist in the same time period. It just loops and loops and loops. And so anybody that goes to a hotel is like swallowed whole by the hotel. And it's just like it's basically just showing that Jack has been swallowed by the hotel. He's become part of that hotel and part of that cycle of violence. Like is a victim to it. Like he propagates it and also became a victim of it.
But we
And
got
so
that
it's
from the
like
bathroom
trapped by the
scene.
hotel.
That's why I
What's
hate
that?
it. We got all that from the bathroom scene. Him talking to Grady
Yep.
establishes all of that. That's why I think that the photograph, if anything, it's just it's I don't know. I think to me it makes it be like if at the end of Inception, if that thing either fell or stayed up, like forever. Like I think it's the same thing where I think for him he just answered a question that would have been a lot more fun to interpret in your own mind.
But
Like
I mean,
not
I
saying that
think in the
Inception's
same
ending
way,
is good because I don't like Inception all that much, but like
so if we like rewind back, then would you make the argument that they should have ended where Jack is frozen?
no,
Is that
I like the just like I like it ending with Shelley Duvall drives, like it just shows him driving off, or not even that. No, it's just maybe it's just he's frozen, and then it just has a very quiet, maybe just the sound of wind of the Overlook Hotel, and then just fading to black like at night.
well? Josiah, what do you feel about the ending? Do you feel it's a good ending?
Like I kind of
But
I kind of characterized it as like Kubrick's like double middle fingers like joke, but I think that's part of the intention. I think it speaks to the cycle of violence, but I think it's also there to make you sort of be like, wait, what? And then to think about it, and then go back and look at it again. I think that's really what it is meant to do, is to engage you in what you just watched in a different way, and to at the very least give you one more moment of feeling disoriented by what you just watched. And I think that that's sort of Kubrick tweaking you with the horror. I think there might be greater meaning to it, but I think the simple effect is that. And I think that's what he wants, because he wants you to, because if it doesn't end with that, it essentially ends with this resolved happy ending where they escape, Jack is frozen to death, the good guys got out, the bad guy is dead. But here it's like, oh, wait, this has happened already. This is going to happen again and again and again. I
yeah,
think that's what he's going for. I
I
don't
like that.
like it. I don't like it experientially. And I'll kind of get back to the sort of my final thoughts on the film right here. Experientially, I do not enjoy this movie. I did not like watching this movie. I watch it during the day because I don't like to watch this movie at night. And I'm not one that gets scared by horror movies, but I wanted it, which is tricky because I have kids. So watching The Shining during the day is really tricky when I had to make sure Penny wasn't like walking into the room to see, you know, Danny having one of his like seizure flash moments of an elevator full of blood. But I don't enjoy it, but I appreciate it as art, and I watch it over and over and over again because there's so much to dig into. And as Paul said, every time you see it, you experience something else. Like I watching it today, especially watching it for the first time where I'm actively like engaged and to take notes on it. I've never done that before. I'm seeing things that I'd never seen before. And that's what this film is, and that's why this film has power. And it unnerves me. It makes me feel uneasy, and especially this is the first time I've watched it. I've probably said this every episode. This is the first time I've watched this movie since I've become a parent. But really, watching this movie with kids, man, it's a different experience for me. And I haven't really gotten into that. But like,
There's
even
that
watching
extra
Blade
level of fear right there. Where you're just like,
yeah, no,
shit.
totally. I'm like, oh my, I would like, I couldn't harm Penny or Prim like that, my girls, but could I? That kind of feeling, but not even that, not even that I am the threat to them. The fear that they would ever experience any kind of threat, even remotely like that, that Judy or my girls would have to run in terror. That's what gets me, man. That's what gets me. Like and I think that I relate to Jack in the sense that sure he is the aggressor, but the way I can relate to him is if my family is in a bad situation because like I went there, I got a job somewhere, I took them there, I put them in that bad situation, even if I'm not the one threatening them with an axe. If they're in danger, if they're not doing well, if they're just having trouble with whatever it is, I'm the one who put them there. It's my failing as a father and a husband, and that's how I relate to this movie newly, and that's what is powerful about this film that I would argue that I don't really like, even though I respect it and admire it as a masterpiece. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. And my relationship with the book is totally different because of those other reasons. And I think they're both masterpieces of their genres and their sort of forms. but I love the book. I actually do, and I don't want to say I hate the movie, but I think I've explained sort of how I relate to the movie. It's an unpleasant film, so that's kind of it for me. That's how I feel. I'm gonna go hug my children right now.
Well, it's funny.
Miss my dog, all that stuff.
Yeah, like Stephen King, he had this fear when he became a father that he could hurt his kids. That he thought, like this whole story stemmed from that fear of thinking that, I wonder if he's capable of hurting his kids, and if that would ever happen.
Was this like the
Because
coked out years of Stephen King?
oh yeah, he was totally
Okay.
This was kind of I don't know if he was coked. This is earlier on when he was really a heavy drinker, though, alcohol. I don't
Yeah.
know if coke, I think, came kind of later when
Well,
once he kind of had his success, but he was a full blown alcoholic when he was writing
Yeah.
this,
and
and
so
he didn't
that's
like.
the funny-
He even said in retrospect that he didn't realize that he was kind of writing to himself in a way. Like he didn't, that alcohol is the demon really in this book, and he didn't realize it until years later when he got sober.
And he actually wrote Doctor Sleep when he was sober, so it's kind of a the other side of the wheel. So anyway, for my final thoughts, I want to recommend Doctor Sleep. It's a movie few people have seen, but it's an amazing movie, a great follow up to The Shining, directed by Mike Flanagan, a fantastic film. I saw it with Tim, a friend of the show, loved it so much, but unfortunately it bombed in the box office. So if you guys, I highly recommend watching Doctor Sleep. And as far as The Shining, I love this movie so much, and I think I always will, and I just always get something new out of it. And I just want to thank you all for joining us on this episode of The Shining. I'm really excited about Halloween, and so I just want to close out there. And so thank you guys for joining us.
Oh, Josiah, tell us where can we find your stuff?
You can find me at Josiah is Right, WRITE, on YouTube and Instagram, mainly on YouTube. I am getting back in the groove of fun YouTube videos about things like this and stuff like that. And one other thing I wanted to mention, this is the first episode we've done since S.L. Steeble, who STEBEL, SL, the initials, he passed away. He was my writing teacher and mentor. He was 97, 98 years old, so he was an older guy.
Great life.
But he passed away a few weeks back. Very sad. I didn't get to see him in the last few years of his life. I was actually going to arrange to try to go see him with my daughter, and he's not in great. He wasn't in great health, and his wife though showed a picture of me, and he did remember me, which meant a lot to me. That I know that close to the end he remembered who I was. But go out, find his work. He's an sort of unheralded writer. Every ounce of talent, or not talent, of skill that I have came from him and him teaching me, and I appreciate it. And I go specifically read the book Spring Thaw, because that is his most sort of fantastical and supernatural that would most connect to The Shining. But go find his work, SL, the initials, Steeble, STEBEL. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Paul, where can they find you?
Oh, just Instagram, Arcade Blackfire, and in my apartment, burning up.
Yeah.
It's so hot. But that's about it.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening in. You can check out all of our shows and offerings on thegrandgeekgathering.com. You can go ahead and subscribe because all of our podcasts are found on all podcast apps. And if you go to our website, we have not only this podcast, but 7 other podcasts. We also have articles and so much more. Go to our YouTube where you can see this show on there. And, after this quarantine, we might have some live action shows and recordings of the show. And it's going to be a lot interesting, and we're going to be doing a little bit more with it. So, yeah, definitely subscribe to us on YouTube because things are coming, especially with us Popmosis Film guys trio. And our music has been provided.
Oh, t-shirt giveaway. My t-shirt giveaway.
Oh, that's right.
So speaking of YouTube is a perfect segue. I totally forgot about our t-shirt giveaway. So this is a me thing. What you do is, it's the gimmick to get some subscribers for us, right? Subscribe to us on YouTube. We need you. We need your support. So subscribe to us on YouTube specifically. Obviously, follow us wherever you are. Subscribe on YouTube. Comment on this video or any of our podcast episodes, Popmosis specifically, and then go over to Josiah is Right on YouTube, which I've also already mentioned, and subscribe there and mention Popmosis, and make sure your subscribers are public so that we can see it, and you will automatically be entered to win an awesome Popmosis t-shirt and or Grand Geek Gathering t-shirt and or Josiah is Right t-shirt. So we will have at least 3 winners because we're going to give away 3 t-shirts. On my dime, I'm sending you that t-shirt from Josiah, from the Popmosis team, from the Grand Geek Gathering. We are sending you 3 shirts. Well, we're not sending one person 3 shirts. We're sending 3 people 3 shirts, and maybe more. We're going to see how this goes. But we want you guys to help us grow, specifically on YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. We do appreciate everyone who listens to wherever you listen, but please specifically make your way over to YouTube and hit those subscribe buttons and like away and comment away to let us know that you're there, and you could win a t-shirt. It's amazing.
Yeah. We'll send it to T-shirt Cannon.
Yeah.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter for more updates and so much more. Have a great week. Wear a mask. And GGG.
So what's on the silver screen? I got some drinks, what it be?
Grand Geek Gathering.